Right, so for those of you of a left-wing socialist persuasion who have used the bird site for some time, you cannot have failed to have come across a very good mate of mine called the Agitator, maker of caustic memes, sender of short shrift, and absolutely brilliant at producing some of the funniest videos going by sticking Labourless lying leader Keith Pledger's face on all manner of other people's bodies in bits of video to hilarious effect. I have no idea how he does it, but the guy's a satirical genius, and it's also pretty much his fault I do what I do, since he's been encouraging me for years. He has a lot to answer for, really. Anyway, the reason I bring him up, aside from saying if you aren't already following him, why not, and where have you been, at Agitate for Change, do it now, is that he made a rather interesting tweet the other day, which has been triggering a few of the Starmerite right. Not that that will stop old Agi, he'll just share it even more. But here it is, take a look at it. What he's put together here is a reflection of turnout in all by-elections under Keir Starmer's leadership, and how turnout has declined measured against the baseline of the 2019 general election. Now, one of the criticisms he's faced for doing it this way is that by-election turnouts are always lower. Therefore, this is not a fair measure, and there is some truth in that, even though they are always measured by general elections, because by-election turnouts are historically lower than general election turnouts. But is there more to Starmer's results here, especially given that over time, as Agi has shown here, turnout is getting progressively worse? Now, you can make the argument, as he has, that this is an indictment on Starmer, but it could be regarding politics more widely as well. Both main parties are disgusting, a lot of people, and both are led by truly dreadful people. Of course, the numbers are just one side of this. They have to be interpreted as well. The leadership of the party and how they are getting on with the job is significant. These elections are always seen as tests for them. The candidate put up is another. Are they any good, and how were they selected? These are significant factors as well, because this affects the local party support a candidate is likely to get. People do not like having candidates imposed on them, after all, and it's been done time and time again and demonstrated time and time again. Let's take a look at this image here, though. I've done this one for Jeremy Corbyn, exactly what Agi did for Keir Starmer. You have percentages there which show turnout exactly as Agi's image does, but I've added change in vote share in brackets too. Positive where vote share has gone up, and minus sign again for where it's gone down. Now, as you can see, it's negative numbers regarding turnout across the board, but that isn't the case with vote share, where people have turned out for Labour, even if the overall turnout has reduced. However, with regards to Corbyn, you have figures compared to the 2015 general election fought by Ed Miliband, and figures compared to the 2017 general election fought by Jeremy Corbyn himself, depending on which general election the by-election in question followed. You might notice some outliers here. Measured against 2015, you can see Labour under Corbyn generally made up ground, or broadly maintained its general election vote, which is not insignificant in the by-election, given turnout is always lower. Batley and Spen stands out here, of course, a huge gain in vote. However, as many will remember, this followed the murder of Joe Cox, and all but a handful of very small parties gave Labour a free run at it out of respect. But if you look at the four post-2017 by-election results, you'd get the impression Corbyn was dying on his backside. That's not the case, though. Of the three Labour defences there, that's the first three in that list, Labour held them all. It's just that the 2017 general election itself saw the biggest voter turnout in a general election since 1997, and as such, the subsequent by-elections are measured against a 25-year high. Now let's look at Starmer now. I've produced exactly the same graphic for him. Now, the first thing I want to say before I delve into these results is that none of them came up before May of last year, 2021. So Starmer had been Labour leader more than a year before he'd ever had to deal with a single by-election. So he had a year to make his own mark. Now, it's a very up and down picture if you take a look at it. Take a look at the turnout figures first, and these are vastly worse than was typical whilst Corbyn was leader. Agi's main point that he was making, in fact, if we flip back to Corbyn's stats for a moment, the worst by-election turnout under Corbyn, setting aside Batley and Spen, as many voters of other parties chose to stay at home, as their party likely wasn't standing, it being that post-Joe Cox by-election, was Sleaford, which was being defended by the Tories and was held by them. Labour still made a small gain. The poorest turnout in a seat Labour was defending under Corbyn, again, aside from Batley and Spen, was Lewisham East, where turnout was down 36.1%, again from that high in 2017, but it also saw the departure of Blairite Heidi Alexander, one of those MPs involved in the anti-Corbyn chicken coup, who is now sniffing a return under Starmer, who is very much more her preference. Coming back to Starmer now, and his worst turnout result also happens to have been his most recent by-election defence from just last Thursday, 2 days ago at time of recording, as the turnout to replace the infinitely forgettable Kate Green She's the woman who replaced Rebecca Long-Bailey as Shadow Education Secretary after Starmer sacked her over that tweet, in case you weren't aware of who she is. I don't blame you if you've never noticed her. Turnout was down 43.6%. That's almost half the turnout of the 2019 general election not bothering. That's the Brexit election. It was also defended by Corbyn, also a pretty high turnout, only slightly lower than 2017. Now, you can point to Labour making gains there, but when only half the voters are bothering to turn out, you've got a serious problem with democracy. Also, look at where Starmer's Labour has gained vote share. They all coincide with the worst turnouts. Stratford and Urmston, Chester and Erdington were all Labour defences, but more people are choosing not to not vote at all than are choosing Starmer and co. Old Bexley and Sidcup was a safe Tory territory. Airdrie and Shotts, safe SNP territory. The only by-election one where Labour have actually taken a seat in a by-election under Starmer was Wakefield, which was the only one where the Tory incumbent got sent down for sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy. But even that couldn't convince a full quarter of voters there to go out and vote, let alone back Starmer's parachuted-in candidate. Fundamentally, by-elections always have worse turnouts than general elections. But what the Agitator has done is flag up just how much worse things are now and have become since the 2019 general election. Apathy is making the biggest gains now. When you look at the results under Corbyn, you see a fairly stable range of figures amongst turnouts aside from the odd outlier. But when you come to Starmer's, it's a mess that on first appearance makes no sense, with turnouts worsening and Labour's gains and losses following no discernible pattern up and down like yo-yos as they are. He has imposed candidates. His first by-election was a Labour loss to the Tories. His second and third were underwhelming disappointments too. He was so desperate to win the fourth, to head off a leadership challenge, lame duck as he was and frankly still is, he imposed Jo Cox's sister in Batley and Spen, having been a Labour member, let alone MP material, for about a fortnight, just to make sure Labour held it and played the emotional blackmail card. Put that in perspective of him trying to get rid of the MP of the Year, Ian Byrne, champion of the Right to Food campaign and fans supporting food banks, just in the last few weeks. Starmer isn't a vote winner. He's functionally demonstrating he's a vote loser and control freak, because people will not vote for beige no-mark candidates offering them nothing different from the misery they're existing in now under the Tories. It makes people feel hopeless, as much as people want the Tories out. There's no evidence here that the next general election will be another breaking turnout event. It might even be record-breakingly poor instead. That can't be levelled at Starmer on his own. But he is definitely part of the problem, and it's not a problem Labour had before him. Numbers do not lie, and when you dig into them as the Agitator has, there's a story behind them, a truth behind them, and that really cannot be ignored.